Good day, everybody, and welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time coming across one of my videos. And I'm the mature exotical lady. Oh, I don't know, everybody. Today I wanted to talk about women who shouldn't have children, and the reason why I thought about talking about this is because obviously, for those of you in the UK, or those of you who keep up with what's going on in the UK or have an interest, today in Manchester, a teacher was convicted of engaging in sexual relationships with two teenage boys who she was obviously responsible for and had a duty of care towards. And in fact, with one of these young boys, she has a child. One of these, liaisons resulted in a pregnancy, and she has a child with one of these children, young boys that she molested. And I believe they were around 15 at the time, and could have been younger. She's around 30 years of age, and actually, I think within the last few weeks as well, I remember reading about another woman in Stoke-on-Trent who had two children. I believe one was around 11 and the other one around 7. Don't quote me. Plane flying over again, guys. But anyway, this woman, she killed her own children, and that situation arises because of some sort of domestic situation between her and their father. And apparently she couldn't bear the thought of her ex-partner taking her children away from her, although clearly they needed to be taken away from her, and so she kills her children. And this was in Stoke-on-Trent, and there was another case, I believe it's in Leeds, which is up north of England, and in this case it involved a mother who was under treatment for mental disorder, and she'd been allowed to have contact with her baby, and I believe during the contact she ends up killing the baby, and so obviously a very sad situation. So it just got me thinking, and sort of reminded me actually of the days when I used to be working in area of family law, doing what we would call child protection law, and I represented local authorities in the United Kingdom in many cases, in some cases extreme cases where they had to actually apply to have children removed from the mother normally, because of either her parenting or the parenting jointly with the father for the children, and in a lot of other cases where the situation wasn't as bad, where it went to court for trying to remove the children, but where the local authority were involved and the children had to go on what you call a safeguarding plan, which means that the local children's social services has to monitor the care being provided to the children by the parents, and predominantly the mothers in these families, And people will be surprised, but there are lots of these cases in each local authority area. There's lots of cases of mothers who are on safeguarding plans effectively, so that their children can be monitored for adequate parenting. And it's just unfortunate that in far too many cases in the United Kingdom, there are children who aren't getting what we would call good enough parenting from usually the mother. And even when the mother's not directly responsible, and you find cases where the parent who is failing is the father, generally speaking, the mother is always in the background somewhere, you know, sort of what you would call failing to protect the child from that father, essentially, you know. And also I've had many cases where, because of family breakdown, you know, relationship breakdown between two parents, you'll have mothers, and it's usually mothers, and I'm not just picking on women here, guys, but I'll come to that. It's usually the mothers in these cases who would then seem to me struggle to sort of accept that the relationship with the father is over, and you end up in a situation where there's a court case concerning whether the father should see the child, you know. And I've had cases where allegations, you know, the mother's made up allegations willfully against the father, as a way of trying to think that, okay, well, you know, the court won't allow him to see the children if I say this, that he's done this with the child, you know. And you'd be surprised at the amount of cases where that actually takes place. You really would be, you know. And to me, personally, as a woman, as a mother, I've got 4 grown-up children, it's very difficult to imagine that if you love your child, you want the best for your child, that you would actually want to prevent your child from having a relationship with their other parent, you know, because of your own relationship with the other parent, you know. I mean, I've been divorced, as some of you would know from having watched previous videos, and I've been divorced, and I've also had relationship breakdown with the father of my children, and I could not imagine ever, even though in my own personal circumstances I can say it was infidelity that led to the breakdown in my relationship. In every relationship I've had 3 significant relationships, and in each case it's infidelity that has led to the collapse of the marriage or the relationship. But I would never have used that as an excuse to prevent the children from seeing their father, you know. Even though, you know, it's very painful to sort of like be in a situation as a woman, and I understand that, be in a situation as a woman where, you know, you've spent years with someone and you feel that you've been let down, right? Whether you're a wife or a common-in-law wife, it's very difficult, it's very painful, you know, and it can take a long time to recover. But nevertheless, you know, as a mother, as a woman, you have to know that you've got to be able to separate those feelings out from that parent or that partner's role if you have children with them, right? So there are so many situations where I've come across cases where women should really just not have had children, and they probably knew they didn't want children, and this is, you know, they probably knew they didn't want children. Now, the reason I'm picking on women in this situation is not because this isn't an issue for men, because clearly it is an issue for men, right? Often there are far too many men who shouldn't have become fathers, we know that, right? But the difference is, to me, is that society doesn't put pressure on men to become fathers. Men aren't given the message, you know, from when they're young, when they're not socialized with an expectation that what they got to look forward to in life is being a father, and that is going to be like the main achievement for them. Whereas with women, and I think that this is the case for women regardless of the ethnicity, regardless of the culture, right, regardless of the country, women globally, young girls from a very young age literally from when you're born and you can play with toys, we're socialized to sort of like get the message that, your role is to sort of procreate, because obviously we are the ones who get pregnant and carry and nurture the developing baby in the womb, right? And but the reality is, not every woman is cut out to become a mother. And so the end result is we see women having children that didn't really want children, right? Having children and then resenting the fact that they've got these children, right? And don't be under any illusion here, guys, that okay, well, maybe a lot of these women struggle when the children are young, and when the children get older, they develop and they become better parents. They don't. More often than not, these women never wanted children. And actually, some women can be very hateful towards their own children, right? Especially if, for example, they harbour feelings, uncomfortable feelings about the father of that child, that has consequences. That has consequences for the relationship that mother has with her own child, and I've seen it. I've seen those consequences firsthand, yeah, I've seen it. I've known situations, I've seen situations where even as adults, that relationship with those children, the mother still doesn't get it. She still doesn't get that, those children feel that mother failed them. They were in care, or they grew up with an extended family member because their mothers just couldn't cope. And you would think that because they're not children no more, the relationship would, heal at some point in the future. But more often than not, it doesn't, guys. It doesn't. And it leads to a pattern, a family system of dysfunction and sort of really strained mother-daughter or mother-son relationships, And quite often, something else I noticed in these types of women is that they are very, very male-centered. And what I mean by that is that their whole sense of validation seems to come from being in a relationship with a partner, right? And that level of validation that they need in order to feel complete encompasses and dominates every element of their life. Yeah. And so what you see what happens in that situation is that the pattern is repeated. The pattern's repeated, guys. So these women will fail to be able to parent a child in one relationship, and say, for example, that child will be removed, placed with extended family to look after the child, and the women will only go on to have a new relationship with a new partner who's equally ill-equipped to be a parent as well, and they will have another child, and the pattern just repeats itself, because people really don't learn. Honestly, this idea that people change and people learn lessons from past mistakes is so overrated. It really is, More often in these types of cases, all I've ever known is a repeat pattern with the same woman, but not only a repeat pattern with the same woman, sometimes a repeat pattern in the same family. So from grandmother right down to mother, this pattern of no sense of self, validating oneself through relationships with the worst types of men, children being produced, and so it goes on, you know? Yeah. And I mean, when I think about myself as a parent, I mean, I was a young parent. I had 3 children very early on in life, okay? And that relationship didn't work out with me and their father, all right? Although we were together for years. And it was an abusive relationship, you know? It was an abusive relationship. And one of the reasons I left that relationship, although I should have left a lot sooner, was because of the potential impact on my children, you know. But what I will say is that although I have 4 children, I quite easily could have lived my life without any children and been quite happy. You know, I know that within myself. I know, I mean, as children go, my children have, you know, I feel that my children have grown up and they, you know, they've, well, the youngest one is still growing up, she's only 21. But my elder children, I don't think they've done too badly, you know. They've done all right for themselves, okay. But it was a struggle. It was a struggle raising 4 children, especially in a relationship where you're not happy, right? It is a struggle. It is a struggle, you know. I mean, if I was starting all over again now, I probably wouldn't have had 4 children. I know that. I wouldn't have had 4 children, right? And in fact, I do believe that if I had not had children, I was so young. I mean, I had my last child when I was in my 30s, but my first few children I had very young. I'm not going to say how young I was, but needless to say, I was a young mother. I was a young mother, right? I probably wouldn't have had children at all, and I would have been fine. I would have been happy with that, you know? It's interesting because as things are now, obviously I have got grandchildren, okay, and I call myself the abandoned grandmother because I've told them, listen, don't look for me for grandmother duties yet, okay. I've just managed to get my youngest one to an adult. I need time to myself. So what I do is I send them money. I pay my way out of granny duties, you know. I could get a babysitter. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, I am very much so one of these women that would have been okay and I would have been happy even if I didn't have children, right? But I know that. And also, something else is that, you know, I was never one of these women who would people please, sort of offer to look after other people's children. No, I wasn't, no. It was enough for me to manage my own, you know. But not infrequently, you have women who just feel so pressured by society that they take on roles that they just don't really want to be taking on. You know, they feel so pressured, whether it's by family or culture, you know, they just feel so pressured to get married or to have children in some of the toughest circumstances as well. I mean, you just look globally and you see in some of the poorest countries, in the most deprived communities, is where most of the children are being reproduced. That's where most of the children are being reproduced, you know? Because often these women feel that's all they have to offer. That's all they have to offer their community is child production, procreation. That's the only value they feel they have for their own survival, because often these women have to get married to men and procreate for these men in order to be taken care of, because there's no infrastructure for these women to develop and sort of like be able to go out there, earn money to look after themselves. So they rely on marriage to do so. And then in these marriages, if you don't have children, then you're deemed worthless by the men in the culture often. And the women can be their worst enemy. The older women can be the worst enemy. You know, I know this is very strong in West African culture, for example. You know, I was married to Nigerian, my daughter's Nigerian, and in Nigerian culture, regardless of the tribe, you know, having children for a woman, it's like they don't contemplate. The idea that you're going to consider whether it is something you want is irrelevant. You know, it's like, well, I have to, for my own survival, literally be able to reproduce, because I need to get married. And then when I get married, I need to be able to produce children in that marriage. Otherwise, chances are that man will just leave me, or he'll marry more women and I won't be provided for, you know? And so all these types of situations lead women who should never have children to having children, only for these children to be abused by their own mothers, you know. And it's just so unfortunate, you know. And as I say, I've raised this topic today specifically saying, you know, not all women should have children, is because the society pressure is on the women to have these children. They're the ones who've got to look after these children. You know, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be the women who are with these children 24 hours 7. You know, they're the women who have to literally produce breast milk for these babies' survival. And you're talking about women who don't really want children, but just can't voice it, can't speak it. And sometimes these women don't even know themselves. I mean, often in these cases that I was telling you about earlier, where the local authority gets involved and, you know, there's a safeguarding plan, or in the worst case scenarios, the local authority has to apply to have these children cared for by extended family or even foster carers, right? These women, they don't know who they are. You know, they just don't know who they are, much less whether they wanted to be mothers, you know, honestly, you know. And something else that I noticed in those sorts of cases as well is that not only emotionally do these women, you know, they're not emotionally intelligent at all, they're also not very cognitively well developed either. You know, they often have learning difficulties, what we would call learning difficulties. They've got a low IQ or a lower IQ, and they don't understand. They really don't understand what's involved in being a mother at all. All they understand is the biological and the physical element of getting pregnant, you know, and the feeling of growing a child, and they feel at the time they're having a child for this man who they live through, you know, their soul validation, and that's their sense of happiness, you know. And then they have these children, and it's, you know, it doesn't work out that way. Often these men have another woman somewhere that cheating and having other children with other women is not infrequently involved in these sorts of cases. And these women become depressed, you know, they're very depressed. Yeah, this is happening up and down the country, you know. So one of the things I noticed recently, which I felt was a really good thing, right, was this whole sort of social media trend of popular subject matter of being child free, women choosing or opting to be child free, you know. And I thought that was a good thing. The only problem with it is that the women who were sort of like able to analyse and sort of have this discussion and post these opinions about it were women who probably would be very good mothers. You know, they were women who would make very good mothers if they chose to become mothers. But of course, they had analysed their individual lives and they had come to the conclusion that certainly for the foreseeable, they didn't envisage that they would want to have children for, you know, various reasons. That include finding a suitable partner who they felt would make a good co-parent or long-term co-parent and husband, and also financial. The rising cost of living everywhere globally, you know, is affecting the ability of people to plan a family, right? And their quality of life. You know, now there is so much that people can do. It's like the world's got so much smaller. You don't just live your life in one area or in one country anymore, you know. Like, you know, the pandemic had an impact on people, didn't it, you know. So people are travelling, people are wanting to experience different things in life, right? And so they're saying, well, that's what I want to do. I want to sort of live my life experiencing all these different things that the world has to offer. And I believe that having a child will affect that, because I'll be stuck in one place, stuck to a routine, you know, and all that, you know. So they are making a conscious decision, for now anyway, because it could change, because these women are quite young, some of them, you know. And they're saying, no, not for me. But the women who really need to be thinking about that are not the ones thinking about that. Most of the time they're the ones whose life is very sort of narrow. They live in a very sort of micro world, you know, having these children. Or like I say to you, in cultures where they're very traditional, very patriarchal, and women are expected to conform to very traditional roles, and your whole purpose is to sort of like be a wife and mother. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're just not going to get picked, sort of situation, you know. So those women aren't being given options, unfortunately. You know, they're not being given the options. They're not being allowed to think about other ways they could live their lives, you know, outside of those roles. And it's very sad. But in places like England, where women do have options, you know, we really do need to start educating from a young age our girls about the skills and the characteristics that they need, really, to be able to think about being a mother when they get older. Because it's not just a biological process, you know. It's not just a biological process. That's all we teach our young girls about, really. We only teach our young girls about the biological process of you know, having a child. We don't teach them about the responsibility, what's involved, you know. What was that? Something, I just heard a funny noise. Yeah, they don't learn about that, you know. They don't learn about that. And they need to. We need to stop making it a sort of default position for young women, young girls growing up, that, oh, you know, the default position is, because, you know, the world needs to be populated, which I don't actually believe. I think we've got too many people in the world, actually, right? We just need a redistribution, which is why I believe in immigration, but that's whole nother topic. But basically, we do need to be saying to them, there are options for you. Okay, think carefully about what you want to do with your life, because you don't want to end up thinking you're in love, having a child, only to find out actually being a mother is not for me. And then you end up being unable to provide good enough parenting for that child, whether you are with a partner or not, you know. And increasingly, mothers are less supported now anyway, because, you know, everyone wants to do their own thing, you know. When you had extended families a long time ago chipping in, like me for example, like I said to you, I'm a grandmother. I literally try and buy my freedom. I'm out here to buy my freedom. So that support that was there many years ago, it's not there anymore even, you know. So it is a huge responsibility. It's a huge responsibility for men as well. But as I said to you, men aren't socialized to believe that the only options available to them when they get older is to, you know, be a father. You know, it's easier for men to opt out of deciding to have children, you know, or they can have children literally and not even have the responsibility and the worry about it. So it's different. It's very different from men. So really that's all I wanted to say today, because, you know, just seeing it on the news, Sky News, that this teacher was convicted, just really made me feel quite strongly about this whole issue about how, you know, women are always, you know, from a young age, young girls are just the default position. You're going to grow up, you're going to have children, when often there's so many women out there who just aren't fit to be mothers, right? And aren't fit to be in any sort of profession where caring for others is even involved, because it's a different topic that I'll talk about at a different time, but it relates to the fact that often women are expected to be carers to adults as well, and that more often goes wrong as well. You know, when women are taking on the responsibility of caring for a vulnerable adult in their family, and they don't really want it. They don't really want that role, you know. And we see cases where that goes wrong, and there you have it. I mean, if you think about it, that kind of links to the discussion I had the other day when I was talking about the inquest, and we had two nurses who lied in the inquest, giving evidence, right? And, you know, analysing those situations, if we were to look deeper, we would probably find that, are they even good nurses? Are they even doing their job as they should, or are they in it just for the money? They don't really want to be carers or nurses, but they may have felt that's the only, you know, lucrative way of earning money in the United Kingdom. So again, it's linked to women and this whole issue, or this whole sort of perception that we are emotional, we're nurturing, we are caring human beings, and that our whole sort of purpose for being is to nurture. Well, yes, I mean, obviously nature created a male and a female to procreate, but not in all cases. Not in all cases. Nature, in my opinion, did not create a set of scenarios where the expectation is that every woman who is physically and biologically capable of making and producing a child, giving birth to a child, right, is suitable to be a parent or carer for anybody, you know. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say for today, guys. So I wish you a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening wherever you are. And if you are in the UK, I hope you went and you did vote. Or what's the time now? It might not be too late, but I doubt by the time this video goes up it will actually be too late. But anyway, thank you for watching my video. Please give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye.